A very, very good evening. A warm welcome to Dan Really Likes Wine, presented by Pick and Pay, as you would have seen from that opening screen. And as you can see now, we are not in the Dan Really Likes Wine cellar, but instead at the Peech Boutique Hotel in Johannesburg. And the reason I am here is partly to drink very nice wine, but mostly to celebrate my wedding anniversary. Now, it's not my wife next to me, a very attractive young man, but not my better half. She'll be joining me for dinner here at the Peech a little later, and it's a very special dinner because it is a pop-up and the return of sorts of Farro, one of my favourite restaurants in Johannesburg, which had to close down, sadly, during lockdown, but they're making sporadic appearances here and there, the team of Alex and Eloise, and Eloise will be joining us a little later on in the show to talk us through tonight's menu and where Farro finds itself as an itinerant culinary stopover in different parts of Johannesburg. But before we get into the food, we need to get into some wine, and so a familiar face on Dan Really Likes Wine, Terry Kilpin, good to see you.
Dan, glad I was able to crack the nod again. Thanks for having me.
I cannot think of someone I'd like to spend my wedding anniversary with. That's you, Terry.
Very special.
Let's start with the sad stuff. Before we get into the wine and a beautiful collection that you've procured tonight to go with the food of the Farro team. Farro itself, we'd had a couple of meals there. It was a gem of a spot. But it was always, you always got the sense they were struggling a little to get people in Johannesburg to come in en masse and appreciate them. And sadly, lockdown proved one step too far.
Yeah, I think they were also not probably blessed with maybe the best positioning in sort of the truck centre. So like they didn't have the foot traffic. So I think a lot of people didn't actually get exposed to the genius of Alex. And I think that just the great thing is that they now sort of got a bit of resurgence and doing these pop-ups, which have all been, I think this is their second or third one that they're doing. There was a 44 Stanley one, all fully booked. So I can see both of them, Alex and Eloise, with great energy again, and they're cooking amazing food. So yeah.
Well, it's great to be supporting them. There's quite a lot happening here at the Peech. I'll be back again next week. Candace from the Saxon doing a dinner, which I shall be turning up for as well. But tonight, looking forward to some splendid food. And if you've never had a chance to get to Farro, you did really miss out, because Alex does have a magical touch about him. However, there will be opportunities such as tonight to see the team in action again, and to do so with food. But before we get into the wine itself, I know you work with your team to put all of this together. Just how challenging is it when you've got a chef like Alex, who's so dynamic, so creative, so exciting, to produce something that's not going to overwhelm the food, not going to be completely overwhelmed by it in turn, and just sort of strike that balance?
I think that when you've got a good chef, Alex is amazing and he's got great taste. And we've also been doing some off-site functions. They've been coming to Great Domains to do some private functions for us. And I think that's the fun part, when you've got someone that's got that touch and they get it. You can have some fun with the wines and not sort of be totally straightforward and just do X and Y, where you can now, what tonight is 3 different countries. There's some South African, and we're getting to know some German. And I think it's just a case of understanding the basics of what's in the bottle from a flavor profile, sort of tannin acidity, and not overcomplicating it, but just sort of as the sort of the first step, not making sure that the wine and the food is not going to clash, and sort of striving for that extra step, which is that sort of really perfect match, which doesn't always happen. But I think to not make it clash and for the wines to go together, and to provide that sort of experience is cool. So you'll see tonight. Hopefully it works. So.
I'll be sure to let you know if it doesn't. We'll find out exactly what that food is just a little later with Eloise. But let's kick off with the wine. We start with the wine that we've actually had on Dan Really Likes Wine fairly recently. We go down to Farro, the Colmant story, which is a combination of South Africa and Belgium, I think, if I'm not mistaken. They're coming together. It's a conversation we had with the team down at Colmant, the fact that Farro is really asserting itself at the moment as a home of Cup Classique.
No, I think one of the things that I probably don't get enough credit for is that they started out only making bubbly, and they still only make bubbly. And I think a lot of the time with a lot of wine farms, not that there's anything wrong with it, bubbly sort of, for sort of completes a portfolio. You've got red, white, rosé, we must have a bubbly. And I think the difference at Colmant, which is for me always the biggest message with them, is that they are absolutely focused on bubbles, and that's all they want to do, and that's all they want to do properly. And I think that is reflected when you have these bottles. It's serious stuff. I mean, it's yes, we're not in champagne, but I mean, this is a wine or a bottle of bubble that's been aged for 30 months before they release it. They're using reserve wines, which is very much something you get in champagne, just to add complexity. And we love this stuff, and it's only going to get better. I think you had Paul on the show.
I did indeed.
The Michelin Man. Yeah, he was. He's a genius, and he, along with JP, who'd obviously done great things before you arrived, his sort of influence is going to start to kick in the next sort of 12 months, and I think it's just going to go from a really high level to even higher. So.
Give us some detail on this particular one. Not much of which is left. I'm getting into my celebrations nice and early. It's crisp, it's fresh, it's delightful. There's some beautiful fruit. What makes it stand out for you?
I think I briefly touched on that sort of that extra aging that they've got. Sort of, as I say, this is the Brut Reserve, which is pretty much an equal blend of Pinot Noir and Chardonnay. Tiny bit more Pinot. And that sort of 30 months, really, you get sort of that extra complexity. 10% of all the sort of still wine goes into barrels, which is also something that not every producer will do, also giving it a bit of structure. And I think at that low level, without getting technical, it's quite sort of a small amount of that fermented in, which I think just does give it a bit of extra structure, I suppose. And it's complex and it's long, and this is sort of almost their flagship, much as in champagne you would have, their non-vintage, and this is their sort of the one that you would, if you take a bottle of Colmant, this is the one, the Brut Reserve, and I think it's just great. It's cracking.
Now, if you're watching this in Johannesburg, you'll know it's a very warm day in Johannesburg. That's the evaporation rate is strong, which is why my glass is not lasting very long, and it just really is delightful to drink. And it's also delightful as a pairing. Often we think champagne or champagne-style wine, we don't get too far beyond oysters in terms of our initial image. Seafood leads into it. Is there something in particular, something we might not imagine, that you think strikes a perfect chord with Cap Classique?
I think it's, to be honest, probably no. No, in the sense that great champagne and great Cap Classique, they broadly sort of cover very similar bases in terms of what I would want to eat with them, I suppose. And yes, you've mentioned all the sort of the cliches, which are cliches for a reason. Oysters are all amazing, but I think any of the sort of your seafood and whitefish and all that type of thing, it's for me, champagne and Cap Classique is about acidity and freshness. So you're salivating after you've had the sip, and you want to eat, and it's something that really makes you sort of want to get stuck into the meal, which is why it's such a nice, not only aperitif, but sort of that start before the meal where you really want to get cracking into your 5-course meal, which you've got later.
Well, I know you've got a night out with some clients this evening and you're feeding them some wine. I'll give you a suggestion from the infamous Joburg foodie as you're heading home at 3 o'clock tomorrow morning to stumble into bed. He reckons that champagne or Cap Classique sitting alongside McDonald's fries, impossible to beat. I'm not sure I agree with him, but I haven't really tried it, so maybe I will get there. A couple of people saying hello. Johan Smuts watching on Facebook. Young Father Christmas knows his wine. I think we can spot which of the two of us is the Young Father Christmas. Peter Bubbles Ferreira. Hi, Dan and Derek. Good to hear from you. Nice stemware you're drinking from. Thanks, Bubbles. And also saying summertime perfect for drinking Cap Classique. Peter Ferreira, of course, the godfather of Cap Classique, and allowing the man behind Graham Beck. Barack Obama WhatsApps him twice a week for wine selections and recommendations. And then Paul Herber down at Colmant. Enjoy the bubbles. Like a day forward. Paul is the man who makes these particular bubbles. Looking forward to our live tasting when we're next up there. I shall definitely make sure I'm there, invited or not, and I'm generally not, by Mr. Kilpin. And Greg's show with Derek looking sexy. Greg has been drinking heavily yet again. All right, let's move on to our second wine before Sherwood gets even more annoying than usual. And just that's kind of a welcome drink. We're going to be having that with some rosemary and red onion focaccia. and some cheese and pickles and biscuits. We then went for a second wine, some cappelletti, some spinach, some macchiato, and a wine here from a group that a good friend of ours is obsessed with, the South African Chef of the Year and King of Tinder, Mr. David Higgs, who came back and he did a bicycle tour of Germany last year, and he came back and he would not shut up about German Riesling. It is all he could talk about. We do make a bitter Riesling here. It's very much a small part of our wine spectrum. Just although the German Riesling, is it something that reaches out and grabs you?
I think it's a bit of a cliche in the wine circles, but I mean, Riesling still probably today is one of the most sort of, I think, underrated varieties if it's made well. It's got amazing acidity. It goes really well with food. It's versatile. You can make different styles of it, much like you can do probably with Chenin Blanc, in fact. And it's often low alcohol, so you can probably drink more than you would normally drink of other wines. And also, it's also from a pricing point of view. If you think of the world of wine, and a lot of the regions have gone relatively crazy in the last 5 or 10 years, and you can still go into sort of the ancestral home of this grape variety and sort of buy some of the top examples of this grape and not actually spend a lot of money. So I think there's a lot of boxes that get ticked. I think the Higgs box that got ticked was that you could probably have 2 bottles instead of 1 because it's only 10.5% alcohol. But I'm not sure which one he was drinking. And the labels often tend to be very ugly, which I sort of, in a weird way, like.
It's sort of Art Deco gone wrong, isn't it? So there we go.
Just a random little toddler on a cannon firing off into the mountain.
And you'll also see, I think it's got the Mosel on there and a few other bits of detail. One of the things that got me most confused studying for my WSET2 was trying to work out the classification of German Rieslings.
You're not going to ask me that, no.
Yeah, no. Just all 8 of them and their background. I won't ask you about that, but let's talk about the wine itself. You get that tiny little whiff of petrol that you often do with Riesling. It reminds me a bit of Zimbabwean white wine, but that tastes like petrol rather than actually has the hint of nose on it, which is a good thing. You talked a lot about the freshness and acidity on the Cap Classique. The acidity that comes through on this is particularly powerful, but I think that's probably what makes it such a great wine when you're having food.
I mean, this is a 17. We didn't mention the estate. I would have said Imisch Batteryburg, but I don't speak German either. But this, 2017, really nice vintage, or very good vintage for Riesling in the Mosel. And I think people mocked us when we started importing this, and they said when we found out that the winemaker's name was Gernot, out of pure sympathy, we had to buy his wine. If your first name's Gernot, you need a step up. And
I see Gernot's actually watching. Gernot, lovely to have you on the show.
He's just cancelled our allocation. I love Gernot. Gernot, how are you?
For people who haven't drunk a huge amount of Riesling, what is the appeal?
No, I think for me it's lightness, freshness, flavor, and also that versatility of style. So the reason why we brought this particular producer in is a lot of the German wines, they're quite difficult to get your head around because you don't know how much sugar is in the bottle. And I think it makes it quite difficult. And I've heard lots of customers say, I pulled this and we had a fish dish, and next thing they put it and it's got all this residual sugar and it doesn't go with the dish, and then you sort of get put off. So his style of Riesling is very much, I would say, slightly more new, not a new trend, but it's way drier than you would get with a lot of the traditional Mosel estates. Not that it's better or worse, it's just way more bone dry. So this is really lean, precise mineral, I also love the fact that this estate has got obviously heaps of history. And when this chap Gernot bought the estate with some help not so long ago, in the last sort of decade or so, but obviously inherited this amazing history, and a lot of the main vineyards were blasted with dynamite in the late 1800s, which is where they started terracing the vineyards, and that's why you see this very interesting toddler.
The cherub.
The cherub firing a cannon into the vineyards. But yeah, I think that just the fact that it's just bone dry, and I don't think it's something that you come across very easily in South Africa from a style point of view. You mentioned we have got a few that we make. There's not many examples, and I just think that when you have an imported wine, you have to have a different experience. Whether you like it or not, it's up to you to figure out. But it has to taste different than what you get here, and you need to sort of harness all the goodness that you get in other places in the world or other regions within South Africa, and it must be typical. So for me, this is typical bone dry, mineral, precise German Riesling, and it's and as I say, goes. What is the first dish?
First dish, some capelleri, some spinach, and some asiagos. So it's going to work very nicely indeed. And just, Derek did mention it, but just 10.5% alcohol. So I think that's a growing trend in terms of not drinking those really big, heavy ones. Needless to say, Professor Sherwood has dropped in. He's just Googled something and has now copied and pasted it onto Facebook. So it looks like he knows what he's talking about. Dry Mosel Riesling seems to be trending in the market after Neid, Pfalz, Rheinhausen, etc. Maybe Mosel traditionally associated with fruity styles. This is not one of those. Amazing wines. Well done there, Professor Gregory. All right, let's move on to our third wine. So we'll say goodbye to some very nice Riesling. I think, because I know you're getting engaged soon, I think Gernhardt could be a great name for the first little Kilpin. Gernhardt Kilpin. It's got a ring to it. All right, we're going back to South Africa, back to the state I know and love, and another one that sits within the Great Domains Empire. This is down to the Swartland.
No, I think this is, if you're going to include, as I say, we had 5 courses, 5 choices, and then if you're going to do South Africa, I mean, actually, you want to do something. For me, at least, at the moment, I'm totally biased, but Shannon from Old Vineyards in South Africa, this is obviously David and Nadia, Sadi. This is sort of vineyards planted between the 60s, 70s, and 80s, so a nice old vine Shannon. He probably doesn't need, I know he's been on the show a few times before, but probably doesn't need much of an introduction, but just a great example of the younger winemaking generation, again, harnessing like the good parts, the sort of the good vineyards that you've got in South Africa and looking after them. I think that's the interesting chat now is a lot of the winemakers who buying grapes to make their own brands, which is all fine and well, and lots of them are making a lot of success. It's that sort of how one ensures the longevity of that and that handshake with the farmer. How involved are they and how involved can they be, and how expensive is it to help them in the vineyards and ensure that sort of consistent supply of grapes. And I actually did a tasting on Tuesday, and we were talking about sort of planning of estates within the wine industry and the difference between, let's say, a South African or, let's say, a New World mindset, where you may be, as a generalization, thinking 5 years ahead, or maybe if you're really on top of things, 10 years ahead. And the European context, just because of the history, we were in the Northern Rhone, and there's this guy terracing his vineyards, Jean-Louis Char, which we haven't got tonight. And I said, how long is this going to take you? And he said, no, well, this job will probably be, if we really get it right, my son might finish this job, and his son's 5. And it's that sort of level of, so I think that's one of the challenges for the South African winemakers, to try and push that forward, that sort of your future planning as far ahead as possible. But it's difficult. It's not easy.
Yeah.
It's not easy.
But part of helping that is getting South African wine to be more successful. Part of that story is getting it around the world. I think a great show, who's busy watching, knows better than most that the Chenin Blanc story is helping South Africa so much, coupled with that old vine story. I had some of Ken Forrester's for lunch today. And it's giving us something unique, because although people tend to think, well, Pinotage is the South African story, Chenin Blanc, we're doing it in both volumes and at a level of quality that matches, if not surpasses, anything else out there.
No, I mean, I think your debate is always going to be, if you're talking Chenin, you obviously have to compare it to the Loire Valley, and you put those two next to each other, and I'm obviously love France and everything that they do in terms of the great wine regions, but on the whole, you'd have to say South Africa's sort of certainly putting up their hand in terms of
Can we say, from a completely objective, totally unbiased perspective, that South African Chenin is way better than Chenin from the Loire?
Just get a mute. Just put the mute on. No, but I think our best examples would probably, would scare the winemakers in the Loire. And a lot of that, they've just been carrying on doing what they're doing. Of course, there's amazing wine there, and I think the one difference that you get in the Loire, you get more flexibility and style there. So you'll have a lot of the sort of slightly sweeter versions, which you'll get here. We're still sticking to the dry, which I think is probably the right call, to be honest. But just historically, that's how some of the wines are made. But yeah, it's certainly our flagship variety and style of wine, whether it's blended or not.
So this is very dry. This sits alongside a salmon bouillabaisse and asparagus dish. I can see that working very nicely.
Is the dinner booked out tonight?
Tell your clients you've suddenly taken ill.
Mine's only a tasting. Yeah.
I see their great show. It's saying Chenin and Chenin-based white blends world-leading category. Indeed, and very, very proudly so. All right, we are 3 wines down. We've got 2 to come. There's an option on the menu here, so you've got your work cut out for you, because you've either got the Wagyu flank with mushroom and truffle cream, or you have the chicken sweet corn tarragon, which comes with a Domaine de Montego Jean Pinot Noir. So we've got some Burgundy to go with it, and it's there we go. One of the many French ones you bring in.
Yeah, I suppose Burgundy is the heartbeat of our business. We work with over 30 odd producers in Burgundy, and Domaine de Monti is obviously one of them. And so we've just finished our Burgundy campaign for the year. This is the 17, and I'm totally biased. Burgundy is probably my favorite place in the world. It's Pinot Noir and Chardonnay. Those are the sort of the expressions that you get from Burgundy. And this is we had to sort of box a bit clever in terms of the menu and trying to make it as accessible as possible. So this is a Bourgogne Rouge, which is obviously the first of the quality classifications in Burgundy. But as everyone knows, the producer sort of makes a big difference ahead of the level of vineyard classification. So De Monti, one of the great producers coming out of, they're based in Volnay. And their style is often very open and elegant and very sort of sweet fruit driven. And 17 is a vintage where that's exactly what you get in 17. You get very approachable open wines, and it's the vintage like 2007, which you can drink early, which is actually nice to have a vintage you can drink early, because people always say, I don't have time to set a wine. In 17, you can drink the wines, and they also age. The better examples will age for a long time.
And this is lovely. This could almost be entry-level Keermont Valley. It's that good.
Another interesting thing with De Monti is they're one of the few of the Burgundy estates that's now fully organic and biodynamic, which is obviously a very trendy topic of conversation, but they started the process before it was trendy, so they've been doing it a long time already. And I think that one of the really fascinating things, without going tangent, because I know we've got a time limit, is when he was out in South Africa, and I said to him, this biodynamic thing, because there's a bit of hocus pocus and hippie stuff, planting stuff in vineyards. I mean, everyone broadly gets the concept, and it's great. And I said to him, does biodynamic farming make your wine better? Which is quite a harsh question, but we had a bit to drink and I wanted to ask him the question.
Get to the point.
And he said he's 100% convinced that it's not doing anything bad.
Okay.
So it's either nothing or improving.
Edging your bet slightly.
That was about 10 years ago, so you might have a different answer, but I like that sort of sweeping statement. Yeah. It does amazing things. Anyway.
Cool. And the advantage of a Burgundy, or if you're going really well at South African Pinot Noir, is it can play around with both a steak, or as we've got the chicken and tarragon dish, it's going to work off both of those really nicely.
Absolutely. No, I think this it's just bright, it's light, it's got a bit of acidity, there's a tiny bit of tannin. So he uses quite a bit of whole bunch in his. You get a bit of tannin when the wines are younger. Tiny bit of grip, but not too much when you're at the Bourgogne Rouge level, where it's sort of a bit softer and you can smash it.
All right, one last wine before we swap you for Eloise and talk a bit about the food, and you rush off to entertain some bankers. and put my bank charges to good use. All right, so last up, we get back to South Africa. It's our final wine. And this isn't a stone we've had a couple of times. Alex has been on the show from Keermont, but it's generally been his Syrah, or occasionally we've had one of his whites. But this is something a little different, and it's a category I love, and it's a category that I feel is probably the one that gets the least attention as compared to quality in South Africa, and that's our sweeter wines.
Well, Dan, I must say, I don't think it's just South Africa. I think it's the entire world. And whatever region you're in, whether you're in Sauternes in France or Tokai in Hungary, the sweet wine category is something that struggles, I think. And you get such at the sort of the top end of the market, wherever you are, you're getting these amazing wines, which generally don't cost a lot. I mean, even we had this example of Chateau Yquem, to be your most famous sweet wine in the world, which you can buy a bottle for maybe 4,000 Rand a bottle, which is a lot of money for a bottle of wine. But that's, let's call it the best of sweet wine. Let's just say that's. Whereas the best Pinot Noir from Burgundy is going to cost you 50 Rand, or the best Bordeaux is going to cost you just as much or a bit less. So I think sweet wine's really underappreciated, and that's why I think it's there's always an opportunity to get some amazing stuff in the glass. And this is Alex's bottling of it, obviously, and it's interesting. So it's 100% Sauvignon Blanc,
which is a little unusual.
Yeah, it's not often you get that. And then they've got an interesting technique where they basically, during the ripening, they'll basically pinch the bunches. So it's basically it's a form of drying and concentrating the sugars, but whilst it's still on the tree. Because often the other things you'll cut it off and dry them on mats or whichever technique you can use. But this is actually on the vine, so they'll just pinch it and then obviously stopping the flow of fluids, etc. And then the grapes start drying on the bunches, and then obviously concentrate the sugars, and then they'll make it from there. So I think it's a terrific little glass.
Well, if you want an idea of what those grapes look like, picture Cameron Diaz's neighbour in Something About Mary, and you've pretty much got that exact grape. But this is lovely. And it's going to be a perfect finish to either chocolate cream, Nazi ice cream, cocoa, or some Huguenot cheese, apricot chutney, and rye crackers. Tough call, but a decision only have to make a little later. Derek, thank you so much for coming through, for putting together a selection of wine. Cool. I'm going to have it in concert sort of later with the food. I think it's going to be a virtuoso performance on both sides. But thank you, and thank you for all the support through the year. We've had some great wine together with your assorted producers. And I look forward to those 15 cases of Sardi for Christmas.
Oh, there we go. Dan, thanks for having me as always. And I hope you have a good night. Send me some feedback after the evening. And dare I say, looking forward to the golf on Monday.
Indeed.
Nice to have everyone here. Sherwood, stop drinking. Put a cork in it. Cheers, everyone.
Derek Kilpin, the global CEO of Great Domains, who's put together the wine list this evening at the Farro pop-up dinner at the Peech, all to be paired with some terrific food. So we say goodbye to Derek Kilpin, very happily so, and we upgrade to a far more dazzling guest for the second half. Come on in. Warm welcome, Eloise.
Hello, how are you?
Good, lovely to see
And
you.
And you?
I'm so excited to be able to eat some food from Farro, because I was distraught when I saw the restaurant advertised, which I can only imagine, if I multiply that many times over, was what it must have been like for you and Alex.
Yes, very sad, and interesting that lots of people, whenever people still call to make reservations, and they say, I see on Google you're permanently closed. Can I have a reservation for 2? But Google's not lying to you. We are closed. And then when we do tell them that we're closed, they're like, oh, you've ruined my day.
I phone once a week just in case.
Well, like one day you're going to be like, come on in, just come for lunch.
Oh, well, the downside is we had to say goodbye, and it was an enchanting little restaurant you had. But the good side is that we're starting to see the Farro brand pop up here and there as we are at the Peech now.
Yes, I think the joy of terrible times is that it sort of breeds opportunity. And I think that that's what we've decided to do, is just, make a little bit of hay while the sun is shining, because, winter's coming again, I'm sure. And so, we've decided to do some Farro pop-ups. We're not in a position to reopen a restaurant right now, but we make food and serve food, so we still need to do that even if we don't have a permanent space. And we've actually been really, it's been amazing the way that we've been sort of embraced by, like, obviously the Joburg community, but also other restaurant owners and landlords and things who say, like, come into our space, like, use it while we have it. So this thing at the Peech is one of those where we're here for the week, and you sort of get to, like, take your experience into a whole other space and just be Farro for the week, which is great.
And particularly good for those of us who get to sample it all. There'll be people watching who perhaps don't really know the Farro story. Give us just a snapshot of what you and Alex used to do, how you came into Farro, and that background.
So Farro is owned by myself and my husband, who is the chef. I do the wine and the front of house and all the other boring bits that someone has to do. No. Alex, trust me, does the hard work. I just have to do all the other, like, bits and pieces. Alex is British. We lived in London together. I lived in London for 17 years. We met working in restaurants there. If you work in hospitality, if you don't marry the chef, you're never going to get married. That's how it works. So I was the general manager of a restaurant. He came in as the head chef. We worked really well together. We got married, and then we moved to South Africa with a view of opening up our own restaurant, because I'm originally from Johannesburg. And we did just that. And one thing that we really wanted to do with Farro was to create a more like European international dining experience than you get in Joburg most of the time. So we sort of wanted to step, like, outside of the comfort zone of a side of butternut and cream spinach. God, dare I say that, the internet will turn on me.
Is that what the menu tonight?
I mean, don't you know? It's a side of seasonal veg. And we wanted to do things where it wasn't like a build your own menu. It's not like a concertina menu that folded out and was this big. It was like, you could get a side of grilled chicken breast and a side of feta and bacon, and it wasn't that. It was sort of considered food that was put together to taste good, so it's not to say that the chef doesn't know what they're doing, so you should pick. It's the chef, like, understands flavor and wants you to have this thing, wants you to try this plate of food. And that was what we decided to do. And it was I think the Marmite of Johannesburg restaurants. And we were greatly loved, for which I am incredibly grateful, and we were greatly, greatly hated by lots of people who thought that they, as the customer, should be able to dictate what happened all the time. And our feeling was really just, it's about having an experience. This is the experience we offer, and hopefully you come in and you enjoy it. And if you don't, that's fine, because I know that there are lots of other restaurants that will cater to your needs, and then you just welcome back to ours. So anyway, that's how we were. And yeah, it was really about, like, simplicity. Also, not to have 1,000 ingredients on a plate, not to have 20 beers in the fridge, not to have every single soft drink that Coca-Cola ever made. Like, to say what we have is very considered, very precise. We decided to do a few things and try and do them as best we could, and that was really the focus.
And if I look at that, the food was splendid. I've got it will be splendid tonight, because Alex is a genius. But what I particularly love, now, I remember writing a column about this because I was so taken by it coming into the restaurant, and the wine list. It felt like I'd made it up myself, because it wasn't, not to knock the big brands, but you'd gone through and you'd found stuff that was cool, it was quirky, it was different, but it was all such good quality. And for me, it was a wonderful window into a world of wine that most diners, especially in South Africa, don't often get to see.
Look, I think, so this is something that comes from my English training, because I've never, other than Farro, I've never worked in a restaurant in South Africa. I never have. I worked in restaurants all over London. I've run restaurants all over London. I've run huge places, tiny little places. I've done all that. But here, it was a brand new thing. And so we obviously came to it with a very European way of thinking. And in England, I mean, obviously, not to be contentious here, I'm still calling England Europe. So sorry. I voted
until January.
Yeah, I voted to stay. So,
no worries.
So in England, there are two types of wine. There is supermarket wine, and then there is restaurant wine. And they do not cross. They just don't cross paths. You will never go to a restaurant and find a wine that you could find on the shelf of, let's say, their equivalent to Pick and Pay, so Tesco's or Sainsbury's. Just didn't happen. And I was amazed that when we came here, you'd go to restaurants that were sort of like well known and quite good, and you would get the stuff that you bought for 60 Rand on the shelf in Pick and Pay. And that really struck me as something that is like a fault of the restaurant industry and a fault of the customer as well, because for a few reasons, because then you never get people to step out of their comfort zone. You never get them to try something else. And it's not that, if you want to drink Sauvignon Blanc, I don't want to say to you, well, you need to drink like Riesling, you need to drink a Riesling, because that's what I want you to drink. It's also just about saying, like, you know what, if you love Sauvignon Blanc, like, you actually might like Pinot Gris, pretty delicious, give it a go. And you might drink it and be like, oh my goodness, now I drink Pinot Gris, or I only drink Pinot Noir, that's it. And I'm like, try Cinsault. If you want something like, they're like, oh no, I love Cinsault. It's just about having that sort of way of just getting people into it. But if every time you go to a restaurant, if you don't want to spend lots of money, you're going to see, I don't know, like a whole Cabernet Chardonnay Pinot Noir on the list. So you're like, oh, okay, I'm going to get that. Or I'm feeling flash and I want something red, so there's like me a list. And that's it. Like, those are the only two things that you can do. So it's never going to encourage the South African wine drinker to step out and to start experiencing these wines that we have. And we have got unbelievable winemakers in this country and unbelievable wine. And I know I'm preaching to the choir here. But I wanted to be able to say to people, like, just come in and try it. And because of that, what I did was I put everything on by the glass. Originally, I didn't have the high-end stuff until Derek strong-armed me into a caravan. Strong-armed.
It is the greatest acquisition I've ever had.
And then we were able to offer everything. So even our like high-end wines, everything was available by the glass. And because of that, you could say to people, try it. Like, just try it. Have a taste. And that would be it. So you could have these like small producers. I also was very passionate about getting very small things. So when people were, they would phone me sometimes, producers and distributors, and say, listen, I've got this wine, I've got 36 bottles and that's it. And I'd be like, cool, I can put it on my list for 36 bottles because I don't need to have guaranteed supply for 6 months because I print my list all the time. So that really gave us that great freedom.
I did love that about it, and I love how it feeds into tonight and the wine that we have, which is some great stuff. I've just tasted all with Derek. I want to bring out the menu and just have a quick look, and let's get a touch from your perspective. Derek's pretended to know how it all works, but let's get the real expert. We kick off some of that Colmant Brut. We've got that with some rosemary and red onion focaccia. Is this you choosing them? Is this Alex choosing them? How does the process work? How are you pairing them up?
So Alex and I generally will work on the wines together. I will often take the full whatever it is that we have and then get them down to a few contenders of what I think, and then we will kind of decide. For us, a fizz for the snacks was a no-brainer because rosemary. So when you sit down at your table, you get rosemary and red onion focaccia. You get beignets, which are like a sort of savory, like little savory donuts. If you'd ever come to Farro, you definitely know them because people would burn the building down if I ever tried to take them off.
And then correctly so.
And then a cheese and pickle cracker, which is a sort of like a whipped blue cheese on a seeded oat cake with some pickled shallot. And all of those things for me just say, like, you need fizz. Like oily things and fizz is the best thing in life, or like carby things. So, that rosemary red onion focaccia, like cooked in like really delicious, that Gabriel's clove olive oil. So you just need that, I think, like that, like nice slice of dry, like yeasty, biscuitiness, just to cut through all of that.
I love the fact you mentioned the Gabriel's clove olive oil. Used to be the best stuff they made, and their wine has now definitely gone up to match and possibly surpass. They've got one of the 217 Finlaysons from the family involved.
I was about to say, you're expecting a Christmas present from Peter Allen with that name drop.
Pete Allen's made some great wine now. Okay, so great selection. We then go on to some Cappelletti. Now, Cappelletti, I think he played for 4 seasons for Inter Milan. No.
It means little hats.
Some spinach, Marciago, and that is going with some Riesling. And as you talk about, I'm actually going to try to taste more of that Chenin because it's fantastic. But tell us about the Riesling.
Okay, the Riesling, comes about. The cappietti is a pasta dish. It's a filled pasta stuffed with sort of a creme fraiche, not creme fraiche, a homemade ricotta that is whipped with some spinach, some Asiago, and some garlic. And then it comes on with sort of like some wilted fresh spinach and wilted baby spinach, and then Asiago cheese grated on top. And that sort of like very unctuous pasta dish, I find works so beautifully with a dry Riesling.
Just cutting through it.
The same way that I think, like, and I don't know if people think I don't know if it's a traditional pairing or non-traditional, but I think a long time ago I had a glass of Riesling and a bowl of carbonara, and I was like, this is it. This is where we're at.
Yeah,
and since then, we've often with these sorts of pasta dishes put a Riesling, and also there's something quite fun about that juxtaposition of a sort of like a German Riesling or like a South African Riesling. I mean, there are a few guys who make wonderful Riesling. I know that like Leon Kutsia from Fledge & Co. makes that beautiful, beautiful Riesling under his Chicken Barrels label, like bone dry, and that works beautifully with anything kind of like truffly, pastry, egg yolk.
You don't want it just dry though, because you don't want the Riesling to be too big if you're having pasta, because you don't want Germany invading Italy.
No, obviously.
That never really works out.
They're usually on the same side though.
Right.
Isn't that how it works?
Before we lose our entire European viewership.
Sorry.
The reason I poured some more of this is because I think this wine speaks to me about your wine list, your wine philosophy so well, because it is brilliant, brilliant wine. It's not massively off the beaten track, but it's a little. It's not one of the big mainstream brands. But David and Nadia, with their Shannon blog, we were talking to Derek a little while ago about the role that it plays in the Slavic wine story. Greg Sherwood chipping in from London on exactly that. And when you bring together Slavic Shannon blends with great food, it's just such a great, great compilation.
David and Nadia really can't do much wrong, and there are a few winemakers that I always say to people: if you go to a restaurant and you see it on the list, it doesn't matter what wine it is, order it. It will be spectacular. Yeah. And this wine I loved because it's a straight Chenin, but 7 vineyards, I believe. So great complexity in there, like lots of the different like Swartland terroir in it, and there's something about, because it's quite rich in it. It's very sort of like luxurious. And that salmon, steamed salmon, seasoned with seaweed, with a really like beautiful, rich bouillabaisse sauce, some lovely in-season asparagus. So again, like those are it's like quite a luxurious dish, like lovely sort of flavors. And you do need that. You need something to kind of like elevate it. And I also think, if you're gonna drink South African wine and you don't drink South African Chenin, then where are you?
You're welcome to drink anything you want, but if you don't drink Chenin, we don't like you very much.
You should also drink Chenin as well. It's amazing.
All right, penultimate wine, and what I love here is you've gone to one of the small, up-and-coming, trying their best wine regions, which is France, and here you've had to get something. Derek spoke about it, getting a Pinot Noir, which can strike a couple of different chords, and here you've got a chicken dish and you've got a steak dish, so you've had to find something that can go down both of those chords.
I just really felt like we had to help Burgundy out. They're not selling enough wine as a region.
Look, it's the poor man's Hammer.
It's hard over there. We're doing the Wagyu flank with mushroom and a truffle cream. And that mushroom is oyster mushroom, which are grown locally, just really down the road. I went to go pick them up myself and walk them home in a crate.
By the side of the road.
That's how close it is to my house. And brown mushrooms, and then those are just cooked down with lots of thyme and garlic and onion. So, those really classically French flavors. And then truffle cream. It's an Italian truffle, but don't tell. And then the Wagyu flank is like lovely fatty cut. Or the chicken sweet corn and tarragon. Again, like tarragon, that really like classic French flavor. And chicken is, I think chicken is underrated. People, I think, often don't order chicken in restaurants because they want to, they're like, oh, it's fine, I eat chicken schnitzels at home. I don't need to have it anywhere else. But actually, it's a great dish if it's done well. And a Pinot, the idea there is to be able to say, it can do both. It's light enough to pair with a white meat, but it's still robust enough to stand up to a steak. But being a Pinot, like it's not, that fattiness kind of cuts through, and really you can't really go that wrong with a Burgundy from Great Domains, I hate to say. We also chose this one because it was like under £1,000, and we wanted
€4. €4.
and we wanted to be able to make the wine pairing accessible to people. We still want to say to people, as we did at Farro, like, come and try it. Like it's, you're not going to have to mortgage your house. It's not a bottle of, DRC. It's just just come in and try and experience all the different wines.
And just to confirm, DRC, that is a Remy Conti and not a bottle from the Congo. So just so you're absolutely sure there. Last one, because I know you've got to go make sure that Alex isn't oversalting the food. And this is something I really love. I was saying that to Derek. A little bit of dessert wine. You saw that earlier. It was actually full, and then Derek just downed the last half of it. Out of Keermont, a Sauvignon Blanc sweet wine, which is a little unusual. But again, paying tribute to a wine space that in South Africa we do not drink nearly enough of.
I mean, I definitely drink enough of it. I think I'm holding up the dessert wine market. I'm a big fan. And I think, again, another thing we always did at Farro was to make sure that we always had a dessert wine on the menu, like on the actual physical food menu. So it was one of the dessert offerings was a glass of whatever it was, a glass of sticky. Because I felt like people need to be drinking more sweet wine. I think it's much maligned, and wrongly so, and it is spectacular. I think that this Keermont Pfeffertine is angel's tears, I really do, and pairs so beautifully with. We've got two desserts, so one a sweet dessert and one cheese. The chocolate cream with a nachi ice cream and cocoa crumb. So real, like it's like a dark chocolate cream. Real bitterness from that cocoa crumb, and then the nachi ice cream, which has like real like tang acidity. So that goes really wonderfully with the with all the kind of like high notes in the Keermont. And then we also have a cheese, a Huguenot, so like a Comte style kind of cheese with an apricot chutney, and then like a homemade rye crisp bread. And again, like a sweet wine and cheese is just, I mean, I could sit there and eat it for days. So yeah, it was also just about trying to like, I don't know, do the portfolio a bit of justice as well, because it's hard to pick.
What it does amount to is an absolutely fabulous evening ahead, and I'm going to disappear into it. Eloise needs to go and work the microwave for the next 3 hours. And so I will simply say thank you so much for giving us wonderful food, for allowing us to see a slightly different side of South African wine with everything you do, and do so enthusiastically, and for joining us for Dan Really Likes Wine.
Thank you so much. Wonderful to be here.
There we go. Eloise, who along with Alex is very much. Actually, just before you go, an important question, because Charmaine Walters, who watches the show while drinking heavily on a regular basis, would love to support Farro at their next pop-up. Where and when? How do people get hold of you? What can they do? Can you come around and cook in their homes? Can we come and eat in your house? Can we meet you furtively in a dark park somewhere? How does the Farro brand work at the moment?
You can't meet us furtively anywhere because we need to take money from you, and I think that has a whole other conversation. The best way to get hold of us is through our Instagram channel. Our Instagram is Farro_food and wine. And we put everything up on there. So that is where we put our pop-up information. That is where we put our, we did a campaign with You Cook last week, and that's where that went. Just everything is there. I'm sort of, our website is rubbish, and our Facebook is not up to speed, unfortunately. But our Instagram is really where everything goes. So that is the best way.
All right, there we go. Charmaine, you and Charles. I know Charles' 70th coming up. Farro_food and wine. That is on Instagram. So head along there, or find a millennial who can point you in the right direction and go and join the team. Eloise, good luck. I know there's a lot more food and wine to come from you guys. Thank you for what you've given us already. We're looking forward to many, many more meals with you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
There we go. I'll let Eloise dash back to the kitchen as I wrap up with a thank you as I celebrate food and wine here at the Peech Hotel in Johannesburg. Some great food, some great wine, and a lovely evening in store. And what I love about it is it's an opportunity tonight to compare some South African wine with some international wine. And there is a delightful Burgundy and a really, really good German Riesling. But the South African wine sits right up there with all of them, as it does with international wine from all over the world. So another good reason to proudly drink South African wine, and that sentiment echoed by Grant Sauls, saying, hi guys, great wines. And Grant knows them well. He's very much a connoisseur. And then Reginald Peckmare, who joins us from Cheetah Plains up in Sabi Sands, where I will be next weekend. Heaven is a place on earth, absolutely stunning. For a fact that you're sampling out of a René Gabriel glass makes the whole game different. And well spotted, Reginald. And looking forward. I'm actually up in the Sabi Sands next weekend, so maybe I have a chance to bump into you again. A couple of reminders of things to look out for. Principally, the Pick and Pay Wine Club. If you aren't a member already, free of charge to join. You just send through your smart shopper card to 36775, and you get, amongst other things, 10 wines at 20% off each month, a 25% discounted deal on a Magnum and a case of wine each month. You get 3 times the smart shopper points, and if you buy 6 bottles or more, your online delivery is absolutely free, and the selection of great South African wine is terrific right across the price spectrum. Also look out for a really cool function coming up at the Maslow, as Dan really likes wine, joins some great South African wine producers. First weekend in December, details to come early next week. And speaking of early next week, on Monday, I'll be at the Dan Nicholl Show Invitational, my other show, where we've got a charity golf day in support of the Laureate Sport for Good Foundation. And I'll be hosting Dan Really Likes Wine from the golf day with Neil from Nederburg, Neil Groenewald, and a couple of our celebrity guests, tasting some terrific South African wine. Thank you so much for joining us. Big thank you to Derek Kilpin from Great Domains for giving us some samples of the wine I'm going to be drinking tonight on my wedding anniversary. My wife will be joining me here shortly. And a big thank you to Eloise Winterbank from Farro for guiding us through the menu and her wine philosophy, which is one I think has a great deal of merit. Keep drinking South African wine, keep supporting South African wine. A big thank you to the Peech Hotel for hosting us here this evening for the show and for a great dinner. And also look out, if you haven't seen it already, for this week's episode of Dan Really Likes Wine, which is the reopening of the Table Bay Hotel up on our usual channels, featuring PJ Powers, our new Miss South Africa, Shudafadza Musida. Who else is on there? Siba Mtongana, the celebrity chef, plus wine from Dele Graaf, from Waterford, and from Graham Beck, and the inimitable Mr. Bubbles Ferreira. That does it for this evening. Thanks very much for joining us. Have a great night, and happy anniversary to my gorgeous wife, Dimitra. Cheers.